transition was not visual. It was auditory. One moment, the distant hum of the highway and the chirping of crickets created a familiar tapestry of evening sounds. The next, silence severed the world like a guillotine blade. Lera stopped dead in her tracks. The silence wasn't empty. It was heavy, pressurized, like the air inside a submerged submarine. She stood at the edge of the Blackwood, a sprawling expanse of pines and ancient oaks that locals in her town rarely spoke of and never visited after dusk. But Lera had no choice. The calendar on her phone, before the screen had flickered ominously, read October 14th. 15 years ago, to the day, her younger brother, Maxim, had run into these trees chasing a stray dog. They found the dog 3 days later, wandering the highway, terrified and dehydrated. They never found a trace of Maxim. Not a shoe, not a shred of clothing. Just the silence of the woods. "I'm here, Max," Lera whispered. Her voice sounded dead, swallowed instantly by the moss and damp bark. "I brought the candles." She adjusted the straps of her heavy hiking backpack. She wasn't the naive teenager she had been back then. She was 30 now, hardened by years of grief and unanswered questions. She had a high-powered flashlight, a GPS tracker, which was currently spinning in dizzying, useless circles, bear spray, and a hunting knife she prayed she wouldn't have to use. The path ahead was overgrown, choked with ferns that reached up to her waist. The sun had set minutes ago, but the darkness here was unnatural. It wasn't just the absence of light. It felt like the presence of something solid, a thick ink pouring between the trunks. Lera clicked on her flashlight. The beam, 4,000 lumens of cold white light, cut a tunnel through the gloom. Dust motes danced in the light, swirling in patterns that looked almost deliberate. She walked. Her goal was the Devil's Thumb, a twisted rock formation 3 miles in, the last place anyone had arguably seen a glimpse of a small boy in a red jacket. As she moved, the forest began to play its tricks. At first, it was subtle. The temperature dropped, not gradually, but in jagged spikes. One step was cool autumn air. The next was freezing, breath mist in the air cold. Then warm again, pockets of impossible stagnation. Crunch. Lera froze. The sound had come from her left, parallel to her path. She swung the light. Hello. Nothing but gray trunks standing like prison bars. "I know the stories," she muttered to herself, a habit she developed living alone. Foxes, deer, just animals. She kept walking, but her senses were dialed up to 11. The landscape was changing. She knew this trail. She had walked it 100 times in the daylight during the search parties. There should have been a clearing with a fallen birch tree about 20 minutes in. She walked for 40 minutes. No clearing, no birch. Instead, the trees seemed to be getting closer together. The path, once wide enough for an ATV, was now a claustrophobic deer trail. The branches overhead had woven together into a solid roof, blocking out the starless sky completely. Lera checked her watch. The hands were frozen at 7:14 p.m., the exact time she had entered the woods. She tapped the glass. The second hand vibrated in place, fighting against some magnetic force, but refused to move forward. "Okay," she breathed, her heart rate spiking. "Magnetic anomaly. Iron deposits. Common in old forests. Rationalize. Explain. Survive." She pushed aside a heavy branch that felt wet and slick, like oiled leather. When she pulled her hand back, her glove was coated in a thick, translucent slime. It smelled faintly of ammonia and copper, like old blood. She wiped it on her pants, disgusted, and pushed forward. Suddenly, the trees opened up. Lera stumbled into a clearing she didn't recognize. It was perfectly circular, the ground covered in dead, gray grass that looked like ash. In the center of the clearing stood a tent. It wasn't a modern nylon tent. It was old canvas, faded to a dirty beige, sagging under the weight of years. Lera felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. She approached slowly, the beam of her light shaking slightly. There was no wind, yet the flap of the tent fluttered as if someone inside had just breathed out. "Is anyone there?" she called out. Silence. She reached the tent. On the ground, near the entrance, lay a toy. It was a plastic soldier, green with the tip of the rifle chewed off. Lera dropped to her knees, the air leaving her lungs in a painful gasp. She knew the soldier. She had stepped on it 1,000 times in the hallway of their childhood home. Maxim chewed on them when he was nervous. "Max?" she screamed, forgetting caution. "Maxim!" She ripped open the tent flap and shone the light inside. It was empty. Noisle bingbag. No equipment. Just a hole. In the center of the tent floor, the earth had been dug out to form a perfect vertical tunnel going straight down. It was about 2 feet wide, just wide enough for a child. Or something thin. Lera shone the light down the hole. The beam traveled down, 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 and hit nothing. The hole seemed bottomless. Then, a sound rose from the depths. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It sounded like wet fingernails climbing stone. And it was coming up. Fast. Lera scrambled back, crab walking away from the tent, her boots slipping on the ash grass. She got to her feet and backed toward the tree line, her eyes locked on the dark opening of the tent. A hand emerged from the hole. Lera clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle a scream. It wasn't a child's hand. It was pale, shockingly white, with fingers that were far too long, possessing too many joints. They looked like spider legs made of bone and wet parchment. The hand gripped the edge of the dirt hole, knuckles popping with a sound like breaking celery. Then a second hand. And then a head began to rise. Lera didn't wait to see the face. Instinct, primal and electric, hijacked her brain. Run. She spun around and sprinted back into the dense trees. She didn't care about the path anymore. She crashed through bushes, thorns tearing at her jacket and scratching her face. She ran until her lungs burned like they were filled with acid. She didn't stop until she collided with a massive oak tree, the impact knocking the wind out of her. She slid down to the roots, killing her flashlight instantly to hide. She sat in the absolute dark, hugging her knees, listening. For a long time, there was only the sound of her own ragged breathing and the blood rushing in her ears. Then the forest spoke. Lera. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. It wasn't a whisper. It sounded like trees grinding together, mimicking human speech. But the cadence was wrong. It was high-pitched, cracking. It sounded like a 10-year-old boy. Lera. Wait for me. Tears streamed down Lera's face. It was Maxim's voice, but distorted, stretched, as if played on a tape recorder that was running too slow. I found the dog. Lera. The voice was closer now, to her right. She squeezed her eyes shut. Don't look. Don't look. Don't look. Why did you leave me in the hole? The voice shifted. It dropped 3 octaves, becoming a guttural, wet growl that vibrated in her chest bone. Why? Lera turned on her flashlight, aiming it blindly into the dark to her right. The beam hit a birch tree 10 meters away. Peeking from behind the white trunk, about 7 feet off the ground, was a face. It was pale, hairless, with skin stretched tight over a skull that seemed too large for its neck. It had no nose, just 2 slits. And its mouth, this mouth was smiling. A wide, lipless grin filled with needle-like teeth that were far too crowded. But the eyes were the worst part. They were human. They were blue. They were Maxim's eyes, set into a monster's skull. The creature didn't blink. It tapped a long, skeletal finger against the birch tree. Top, top, top. Found you, it whispered. Lera scrambled up, adrenaline overriding her exhaustion. She didn't run blindly this time. She ran with frantic purpose, heading west, or what she hoped was west, away from the thing. She could hear it behind her. It didn't run like a human. It moved through the canopy. She heard the heavy thuds of it jumping from tree to tree, branches snapping under its unnatural weight. It was hunting her from above. She burst through a thicket of thorns and tumbled down a steep embankment, rolling uncontrollably through mud and rotting leaves until she hit the bottom of a ravine. She lay there, covered in muck, flashlight flickering. Above her, on the ridge she had just fallen from, a silhouette appeared against the slightly lighter gray of the sky. It was tall, impossibly thin, its arms hanging down past its knees, crouched, looking down into the ravine. Lera held her breath, her hand gripping the hilt of her knife so hard her knuckles turned white. The creature cocked its head, like a bird. Then, It stood up on its hind legs and did something that made Lera's blood turn to ice. It mimicked the sound of a police siren. Whoop whoop, whoop whoop, perfectly. Electronic, loud, jarring in the silent woods. Then it mimicked her mother's voice. Dinner's ready. Wash your hands. Then the sound of a bone snapping. It was mocking her. It was playing with its food. The creature dropped to all fours and began to descend the slope, moving with the fluid, jerky motion of a spider. Lera scrambled backward, her boots splashing in a shallow creek. She aimed her light downstream. About 50 meters away, a small, warm light flickered. A fire? A cabin? She didn't hesitate. She splashed through the water, forcing her tired legs to pump. The creature behind her let out a shriek, a high, piercing sound that sounded like metal tearing. It was closing the distance. Lera reached the source of the light. It wasn't a cabin. It was an old fire tower, rusted and looming, but in the glass box at the very top, a lantern was glowing. She hit the metal stairs, climbing 2 at a time. The metal groaned under her weight. Thump! Something heavy hit the bottom of the stairs. The structure shook. Lera didn't look down. She climbed faster, her lungs screaming. Clang, clang, clang. The creature was climbing the metal struts, bypassing the stairs, climbing the outside of the tower like an insect. Lera reached the trapdoor at the top. It was locked from the inside. Open up! She screamed, pounding on the metal. Please! It's here! A skeletal hand slapped onto the railing right beside her foot. Lera screamed and kicked it, felt hard as stone. The creature hissed, a sound of pure malice. Its face rose above the platform edge, jaws unhinging, ready to bite. Suddenly, the trapdoor flew open. A hand, rough, human, dirty, grabbed Lera by the collar of her jacket and yanked her upward with incredible strength. She tumbled onto a wooden floor. The trapdoor slammed shut. A heavy iron bolt was slid into place. Bang! The creature slammed into the door from below. The whole tower swayed. Bang! Let me in! Maxim's voice cried from beneath the floorboards. It's cold. Lera! The man standing above her didn't look at the floor. He was older, perhaps 50, with a gray beard and eyes that looked like they had seen the end of the world. He held a double-barreled shotgun, but he wasn't pointing it at the door. He was pointing it at the windows. Don't listen to it, the man said, his voice like gravel. And for God's sake, turn off that damn flashlight. You're beaming a chaotic signal right into its brain. Lera clicked off the light, plunging the small room into the dim orange glow of a kerosene lantern. Is it gone? She whispered, trembling uncontrollably. The man looked at her, his expression grim. Gone? No, it's just confused. It hasn't had fresh meat in a long time. He walked to the window and peered out into the darkness. You're the girl who lost the brother, aren't you? The one who keeps leaving candles. Lera nodded, tears welling up again. How do you know? Because... The man turned, and the lantern light cast deep shadows across his scarred face. I'm the one who buries them. Outside, the scratching on the metal walls intensified. Thousands of clicks, like a swarm of beetles. Welcome to the hollow, Lera, the man said, checking his ammo. Night has just started, and this night lasts a lot longer than 12 hours. The interior of the fire tower smelled of kerosene, old tobacco, and dried sage. It was a small, hexagonal room enclosed by reinforced glass windows that offered a panoramic view of the nightmare outside. Lera sat huddled in the corner, her knees pulled to her chest, shivering violently. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind a cold, nauseating shock. Scrape, scrape, scree. The creature was still outside. It was testing the metal siding of the tower, running its claws along the rivets, looking for a weak point. Every few seconds, a pale, flat face would press against the glass, just for a heartbeat, before vanishing into the dark. The man, who had introduced himself as Elias, ignored the creature. He was busy at a small workbench, filling shotgun shells with something that looked like coarse gray salt. Stop looking at it, Elias said without turning around. Eye contact feeds it, creates a bond. Once it thinks you acknowledge it as an equal, it won't stop until one of you is dead. What is it? Lera's voice was barely a whisper. Is it a demon? Elias snorted. He snapped the shotgun closed. Demons are religious. They follow rules. That thing out there? It's biology. Just biology we forgot about. I call it a mimic. The locals call it the Pale Walker. But names don't matter. It's an ambush predator. He turned to face her. In the lantern light, Lera saw the toll the forest had taken on him. His skin was leathery and gray, his eyes constantly darting to the windows. He wore a necklace made of small bones. Bird, maybe rodent. Why did it sound like Maxim? Lera asked, the question hurting her throat. Elias softened slightly. He walked over and poured her a cup of lukewarm water from a metal canteen. Because it eats sound. It eats memories. It's been listening to these woods for decades. It heard the search party 15 years ago. It heard your mother crying. It heard the police radios. It records everything, Lera, and it plays it back to lure you in. So, Maxim is dead. Lera stared into the cup. Elias didn't answer immediately. He walked to the window, staring out at the swirling fog below. The scratching had stopped, which was worse. Death is complicated here, Elias said finally. The hollow preserves things, but not in the way you want. He gestured to the back wall of the cabin. For the first time, Lera noticed it was covered in objects. Not hunting trophies, driver's licenses, car keys, watches, a child's hair ribbon, a single sneaker, dozens of them, hanging on nails like a grotesquely organized museum. I'm the archivist, Elias said. I collect what's left behind. I found your brother's jacket 12 years ago. It was folded neatly on a stump 3 miles north of here. No blood, just folded. Lera stood up, her legs shaking. Show me. Sit down, Elias commanded. We aren't going anywhere tonight. The fog is rising. If you step into that fog, you won't find your way back. The geography shifts. North becomes south. Down becomes up. Suddenly, the tower shuddered. A heavy weight had landed on the roof. Metal groaned. The roof bowed inward slightly. Dust trickled down from the wooden ceiling beams. It brought friends, Elias muttered. He blew out the lantern instantly. Darkness swallowed the room, save for the faint, sickly moonlight filtering through the fog. Lera held her breath. Above them, on the thin metal roof, footsteps paced. Not 2 legs. Not 4. Many. It sounded like a centipede the size of a man. Tap, tap, tap. The sound came from the glass directly in front of Lera's face. She looked up. Hanging upside down from the roof overhang, staring into the cabin, was the mimic. But it wasn't alone. Behind it, clinging to the metal railing, were 2 smaller figures. They looked like children. Small, pale, naked, but their limbs were twisted backward, like grasshoppers. The large mimic opened its mouth. It didn't scream this time, pressed its palm against the glass. The glass fogged up. With a long, singular finger, it wrote in the condensation on the outside of the window. Lera. Then it smiled and spoke, but it didn't use Maxim's voice. It used Lera's voice. It used her internal monologue. I should have watched him closer. It's my fault. I was on the phone. I let him run. I hate myself. I want to die. Lera clapped her hands over her ears. Stop it. I never said that out loud. It can hear your thoughts when the fear is high enough, Elias whispered. It resonates with the electrical impulses in your brain. Don't listen. Lera, look at me. Recite the alphabet. Dumat. Anything to block the signal. Open the window, Lera. It's warm inside. We are so cold. The glass began to crack. A spiderweb fracture appeared under the mimic's palm. Elias racked the shotgun. Get to the trapdoor. Now. You can't shoot through the glass. It's reinforced. I'm not shooting the glass, Elias growled. I'm shooting the lock. Crack. The window exploded inward. The mimic didn't jump in. It flowed in, like spilled milk, defying gravity. The 2 smaller creatures followed, chittering like insects. Elias fired. The boom was deafening in the small space. The shot of rock salt and iron filings hit the mimic in the chest, blasting it backward against the window frame. It screeched, a sound like metal on a chalkboard, and thrashed, its skin smoking where the salt touched it. Go! Elias yelled. Lera scrambled to the trapdoor, unbolted it, and dropped onto the metal stairs outside. The wind hit her instantly, freezing, smelling of ozone and rot. She looked up. Elias was backing out of the door, firing a second shot into the cabin. One of the smaller creatures leaped at him, latching onto his leg with needle teeth. Elias grunted, smashed the creature's head against the railing with the butt of his gun, and slid down the ladder, nearly knocking Lera off. Down! Fast! They descended the rattling structure. Above them, the cabin was a war zone of screeching and smashing glass. They hit the ground running. The path! Lera yelled, pointing toward where she came from. No! Elias grabbed her arm, his grip like iron. The path is a loop now. It will just lead you back to the tower. We have to go into the gray zone. The what? The dead part of the forest, where the trees don't grow anymore. It's the only place they don't like to go. They ran through the undergrowth. The forest had changed again. The trees here were enormous, ancient pines that blocked out the sky completely. And they were wrong. Their bark looked wet, pulsating slightly. Lera heard the pursuit behind them. The mimics were fast. She could hear them moving through the canopy, swinging from branch to branch, pacing them. They're hurting us, Lera gasped, her chest burning. Keep moving. Don't look up. Suddenly, the trees stopped. They burst into an open area. The ground here was gray dust, hard as concrete. There was no grass, no bushes, just petrified tree stumps that looked like broken teeth. And in the middle of this dead zone stood a house. Lera slowed down, her feet skidding in the dust. She knew this house. It was a 2-story wooden house with peeling blue paint and a porch swing that hung by one chain. Lera couldn't breathe. That's my grandmother's house. It was demolished 10 years ago. It was in the city, miles from here. It's not the house, Elias warned, raising his weapon. It's a memory. The forest pulled it from your head. It's constructing a trap. But it looks so real. The front door of the house creaked open. Warm, yellow light spilled out onto the gray dust. The smell of baking apples, her grandmother's recipe, wafted out, overpowering the stench of the swamp. A silhouette appeared in the doorway. A small boy. He was wearing a red jacket. He held a toy soldier in one hand. Max! Lera took a step forward. The skepticism, the fear, it all washed away under the tidal wave of hope. Lera, wait! Elias lunged for her, but he was too slow. Lera walked toward the porch. Max, is that you? The boy didn't move. He stood perfectly still. I've been waiting, Lera, the boy said. His voice was perfect, not distorted, just a sad, lonely child. Why did it take you so long? I tried, Lera sobbed, stepping onto the wooden stairs. They creaked, the exact sound she remembered from childhood. I'm here now. Come on. We have to go. The boy looked up. His face was Maxim's face. Every freckle, the small scar on his chin. But his eyes were older, ancient. We can't go, Lera, the boy said softly. I'm rooted now. He lifted his leg. There was no foot. His jeans ended in a mass of gray, writhing roots that dug deep into the wooden porch, fusing him to the house. The roots pulsed, pumping a dark fluid up into his small body. Lera froze. Horror replaced hope instantly. What happened to you? The forest loves me, the boy smiled. A trickle of black sap leaked from the corner of his mouth. It loves all of us. Join us, Lera. It doesn't hurt anymore. The cold goes away. Behind the boy, inside the house, Lera saw movement. The living room wasn't a living room. It was a nest. Dozens of people. Hikers. Hunters. Children. They were all standing in the warm light, fused to the floor, fused to the walls. Roots grew through their clothes into their skin. Their eyes were open, staring at nothing, their mouths moving in a silent, collective chant. They weren't dead. They were fertilizer. No! Lera screamed, stumbling back off the porch. The boy's face twisted. The skin split. Stay! The house groaned. The wooden planks of the porch curled up like tongues, lashing out at her ankles. Elias grabbed Lera by the back of her jacket and threw her to the ground. He leveled the shotgun at the boy. Don't! Lera screamed. Elias pulled the trigger. The blast hit the boy in the chest. There was no blood, only a spray of sawdust and black ichor. The boy didn't fall. He shrieked, the same metallic screech as the mimic, and his jaw unhinged, revealing a hollow wooden interior. "It's wood," Elias yelled, dragging Lera backward. "It's all just wood and fungus. Run!" The house began to scream. Every window slammed open. The people inside writhed, their roots tearing from the floor as they tried to reach for the intruders. The grandmother's house began to dismantle itself, the boards shifting and reshaping into a massive, wooden wave crashing toward them. Lera and Elias sprinted across the gray dust. Behind them, the mimic from the tower dropped from the sky, landing on the roof of the screaming house. It looked at the chaos, then at the fleeing humans. It let out a howl that shook the ground. "Where are we going?" Lera cried, her vision blurring with tears. "The caves," Elias panted. "The limestone caves under the ridge. The roots can't penetrate solid rock." "But Maxim, I saw him." "You saw a puppet," Elias shouted. "A lure. The real Maxim isn't in the house. If he's still here, if there's anything human left in him, he's at the heart, in the center of the hollow." They reached the edge of the gray zone. The ground sloped sharply downward into a rocky ravine. "Jump!" They slid down the shale, rocks tearing at their clothes, landing hard in a stream bed. Elias pointed his flashlight at a dark fissure in the cliff face. "In there! Quick!" They squeezed through the narrow opening just as the wooden limbs of the house thing reached the edge of the cliff above. Inside, the cave was cold and damp. The roar of the forest was muffled here. Lera collapsed against the stone wall, gasping for air. She looked at Elias. He was bleeding, a deep gash on his shoulder where the mimic had grazed him in the tower. The blood looked dark, too dark. Elias saw her looking. He covered the wound with his hand. "I'm fine," he grunted. Lera stared at him. She noticed something she had missed in the panic. On his neck, just below the collar of his jacket, a patch of skin that looked grayish, like bark. "Elias," she whispered, "how long have you been in these woods?" Elias looked at her, his eyes weary and full of a terrible sadness. "I told you I was part of the search party, Lera," he said softly, "but I didn't say I survived it." He moved his hand from his shoulder. The wound wasn't bleeding blood. It was leaking sap. "I'm turning," he said simply. "The forest is claiming me. Slowly. I've been fighting it for 15 years. But I'm running out of time. And so are you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a map. It was hand-drawn, covered in chaotic scribbles. He pointed to a red circle in the middle of the paper. "The heart," he said. "That's where the source is. The brain of this whole organism. If you want to stop this, if you want to free your brother's soul, you have to go there. You have to burn it." "I can't do this alone," Lera said, her voice trembling. "You won't be alone," Elias said, reloading his shotgun with slow, stiff movements. "I'll get you there, but you have to promise me one thing." "What?" "When I fully turn, when I stop speaking and start clicking," he looked her dead in the eye, "you used that knife of yours, and you cut my head off. Do you understand?" Lera stared at him, the horror of the night settling heavy in her bones. She nodded slowly. "Good," Elias said. "Now rest. We have 4 hours before dawn. And in the hollow, dawn brings the fog." The silence of the cave was replaced by a sound that made Lera's teeth ache. A low, rhythmic thumping. Thump thump, thump thump. It was the heartbeat of the forest. They had been walking for 2 hours. The terrain had shifted again. The rocky ground of the caves gave way to a soft, spongy surface that felt uncomfortably like flesh disguised as moss. The trees here didn't have bark. They had skin. Gray, callous skin that bled a thick red sap when brushed against. Elias was moving slower. His left leg dragged. The gray bark-like infection had spread up his neck, covering his jaw. One of his eyes was now milky white, the pupil gone. "We are close," Elias rasped. His voice sounded like dry leaves crushing together. "The heat, can you feel it?" Lera nodded, sweating. It was humid, a tropical, rot-filled heat. The air tasted of iron. "Elias," she whispered. "Your hand." Elias looked down. His left hand, gripping the shotgun, had fused to the wood of the stock. His fingers were no longer fingers. They were gnarled twigs wrapping around the metal. He couldn't let go of the weapon even if he wanted to. "It doesn't matter," he grunted, forcing himself forward. Better weapon than hand now. They entered a vast chamber where the trees arched overhead, forming a cathedral ceiling of woven branches. From these branches hung fruit, large, translucent sacks filled with fluid. Inside each sack, curled in a fetal position, were shapes: a deer, coyote, a hiker with a backpack. They were being digested, or transformed. "Don't look," Elias ordered, though his own voice wavered. "Just keep moving toward the center." Suddenly, the ground beneath them convulsed. A root, thick as a python, erupted from the spongy soil and whipped around Lera's ankle. She screamed as she was yanked off her feet and dragged toward the tree line. "Lera!" Elias spun around, raising his fused shotgun arm. He fired. The blast severed the root in a spray of black ichor. Lera scrambled away, gasping. But the forest had woken up. From the shadows they emerged. Not one mimic, dozens. They crawled down the trees, dropped from the canopy, pulled themselves out of the mud. Pale, skeletal, their joints clicking in unison. They didn't attack immediately. They formed a circle, chittering softly. Then the largest one, the one from the tower, stepped forward. His chest was scorched black from Elias's first shot. It looked at Elias and smiled, pointed a long finger at him. "Bro, there." It hissed. Elias froze. He looked at his own bark-covered skin, then at the monster.
"No, Elias growled.
"I am not your brother." He looked at Lera. The infection had reached his mouth. He could barely speak. "Run," he choked out. "The heart is just ahead. A red glow. Run." "I can't leave you," Lera cried, scrambling to her feet. "I can't move," Elias said. And it was true. His legs had stopped looking like legs. Roots were shooting out of his boots, digging rapidly into the ground, anchoring him to the spot. He was becoming a tree. The mimics shrieked and charged. Elias roared, a sound half human, half timber. He didn't aim. He just pulled the trigger, reloading with his good hand, firing again and again. The blasts tore through the pale bodies, but they kept coming. "Geo!" he screamed, the bark finally sealing his lips shut. Lera turned and ran. Behind her, she heard the wet, tearing sound of Elias being ripped apart, or perhaps being absorbed. She heard the shotgun fire one last time, then a crunch, then silence. She didn't look back. She ran toward the red glow. The vegetation became denser, slick with slime. She had to hack her way through membranes that stretched between trees. Finally, she burst into the center, the heart of the hollow. It was a crater 50 meters wide. In the center, rising from a pool of black liquid, was a massive structure. It looked like a heart, but made of millions of woven roots, pulsing with a sick, red light from within. Veins of light pumped up into the sky, feeding the fog, feeding the forest. And embedded in the center of the heart, like a jewel in a ring, was a throne. Sitting on it was Maxim. He looked exactly as he had 15 years ago, 10 years old, red jacket, untouched by time or decay. His eyes were closed, as if sleeping. "Max!" Lera sobbed, dropping to her knees at the edge of the crater. "Max, wake up!" The boy's eyes snapped open. They were entirely black. "No whites, just voids." "Lera," he said. His voice was amplified, echoing from every tree, every stone. It wasn't the voice of a child. It was the voice of a god. "You finally came to play. Let him go," Lera screamed, pulling the flare gun she had taken from Elias's pack. "Let him go, you monster." The boy on the throne tilted his head. "Let him go? He is happy here. We are all happy. No pain, no death, only the green." Vines began to rise from the black pool, slithering toward her. "Maxim is gone," the entity said, using the boy's mouth. "He died in the cold, Lera. He cried for you for 2 days. He froze. We took him in. We gave him warmth. We gave him purpose. He is the seed. You killed him. We saved him. And now we will save you." The vines lashed out, Lera rolled to the side, dodging a strike that cracked the stone she had been kneeling on. She scrambled up the ridge of the crater. She fumbled with the flare gun. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped it. "You can't burn us," the entity laughed. "We are the earth. We are wet. We are eternal." Lera looked at the massive, pulsing heart. It was wet, yes, slime and sap, but sap is flammable. Turpentine is made from trees. She remembered the other thing in Elias's pack, a canister of accelerant he used for the lantern. She ripped the cap off and hurled the canister into the crater. It arced, spinning, and landed with a splash right at the base of the root throne. The entity's smile faltered. "What are you doing?" "Ending the game," Lera whispered. She raised the flare gun, aimed not at the boy, but at the pool of black liquid below him. "No!" the forest roared. The sound was deafening. Every tree in the clearing screamed. Lera pulled the trigger. The flare hissed, a streak of blinding red magnesium, and struck the pool. For a second, nothing happened. Then the accelerant caught, and the black sap, volatile, ancient, concentrated, ignited. Whoosh! An explosion of fire, white-hot and furious, roared up the side of the heart. The scream that came from Maxim's mouth shattered the air. It wasn't a boy's scream. It was the sound of 1,000 souls burning at once. The boy, the thing that looked like the boy, began to thrash. The roots holding him caught fire. The skin of the trees peeled away in the heat. "Lera, it burns. Help me." The voice cycled through everyone she knew. Her mother, her father, Elias, Maxim. Lera shielded her face from the intense heat. The fire was spreading impossibly fast, feeding on the unnatural oils of the forest. The fog above turned into a swirling vortex of smoke and ash. The mimics, who had been gathering at the edge of the crater to stop her, shrieked and retreated, their pale skin blistering instantly in the heat. The heart began to collapse. The massive root structure groaned, snapping like suspension cables. Lera turned and ran. The shock wave of the fire pushed her forward. She sprinted blindly through the burning woods. The illusion of the forest was breaking. The trees were no longer flesh. They were just burning timber falling around her. The path straightened out. The shifting geometry failed as the brain of the forest died. She ran until her lungs bled. She ran until the soles of her boots melted. She ran until she saw the gray light of dawn and the hard asphalt of the old highway. She burst out of the tree line and collapsed onto the road. Behind her, the Blackwood was an inferno. A pillar of black smoke rose miles into the sky, blotting out the sun. She lay on the yellow line of the road, gasping, staring at the sky. She was alive. She was alone. Epilogue. The official report said it was a wildfire caused by a lightning strike or illegal camping. They found no bodies.
No Elias. No Maxim.
The fire burned so hot it turned the soil to glass in some places. Lera moved to the city. She got a job in a library, surrounded by concrete and dead paper. She never went camping. She never walked on grass if she could help it. She thought she was free. 6 months later, Lera was in her bathroom, brushing her teeth. The exhaust fan hummed. The city traffic was loud outside. Safe. She spat the toothpaste into the sink and rinsed her mouth. She looked in the mirror to check her teeth. She paused. In the back of her throat, near her tonsils, there was a small spot. She leaned closer, opening her mouth wide, tilting her head to the light. It wasn't an infection. It was green, a tiny, perfect sprout, curling up from the soft tissue of her throat. And as she stared at it in horror, she heard it, faint, tiny, echoing from inside her own skull. Click, click. Home. Lera grabbed a pair of tweezers. She clamped them onto the sprout and pulled. Pain, sharp and blinding, shot through her jaw. The sprout didn't come out. It was rooted deep, wrapped around her vocal cords, wrapped around her spine. She dropped the tweezers. She looked at her eyes in the mirror. For a second, just a split second, her pupils weren't round. They were vertical, like a goat's, or a predator's. She realized then that Elias was wrong. You don't beat the hollow by burning it. Fire is just how pine cones release their seeds. The heat hadn't killed it. The heat had helped it spread. Lera turned off the light. In the darkness of her apartment, she sat on the floor and waited for the bloom, the end.